at developing grant proposal, the technical support that our technical team can give. So, the State Board is offering technical assistance for the grant applicants that are selected to help provide concept designs, utilizing the same LID techniques that we described just earlier. So this technical assistance is here for you, and it's several different parties that can help with that effort. And this assistance is very, very tailored. It's with folks that have very much specific expertise in dealing with school retrofits and LID. The two types of technical assistance that is offered is that we'll provide a email hotline to answer any sort of questions, and we'll try to turn that around in relatively short order as much as possible, but also providing a little bit more comprehensive assistance that might include site visits to a specific school to help identify opportunities for retrofitting the school site, and helping out with identifying what might go into a concept design, and also trying to give some assistance in estimating cost and potential benefits of looking at specific strategies. So we have a technical assistance application, and interested applicants need to submit this application. The deadline is October 10th, 2004. Disadvantaged schools will be prioritized, and the application is available on the Drought's website, which everybody should have. There are some additional resources that we've included with this. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but please take a look at some of these resources. They're excellent, and they can help guide you with your efforts for submitting a successful grant application. So with that is the ending of the LID technical presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Before you go, we had a few questions come in while you're doing your presentation. I will say that I think the bulk of the questions will be addressed during our application assistance presentation. So for the people that emailed, patients, we'll get back to you. There was one question that I thought maybe you could lend your opinion on. It's regarding underground utilities. It's not an easy question, but the question is, when we retrofit a school or a road, are there standard details on how to deal with utilities that are underground?
The standard details vary quite a bit from, if you're looking at a road, from municipality to municipality or school district to school district. What is consistent is an overall approach for dealing with utilities with LID. And one of the first things that we try to do when we're looking at retrofitting is try to avoid the details altogether. Not the details, but the utilities. The utilities altogether. And that's where I was talking about utilizing some different techniques, such as planter systems that can be fit into confined spaces that will not have direct conflict with utilities. Again, very applicable to street situations as well as school sites. The other approach, and we're moving from simple to more complex, is looking at just acceptance, the idea of accepting, okay, there's a utility there, maybe the stormwater facility, there's a water line that goes underneath that, that facility. And I've built this in quite a few situations where we know there's a water line there, but we don't feel it's an issue to have to replace that water line because there's a conflict in the footprint of having that facility be over a utility. You can also just overall mitigate, and the idea of mitigation with respect to LID and utilities is that we really want to have a rain garden in this space. We have this utility. We need to alter our design just ever so slightly to help avoid the utility itself. So it's not saying I'm not going to put something here, but I'm just going to change the design just a little bit so that can exist. And then the last kind of approach is, and the most expensive, is suggesting that we need the stormwater facility here. but we're just going to replace and relocate that particular utility away from the stormwater facility itself. So there's a wide range of approaches that has been utilized with retrofitting, dealing with utilities. Yes.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Are there any concerns with water quality on first flush from rainfalls that go into cisterns?
Into cisterns.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the condition of where the, if it's on a rooftop, what's the composition of that rooftop? So there's that concern with particular matter going onto the rooftop and that being washed into cistern conditions. But there's also, what is that roof made of when that water comes through? Generally, the plants can handle the particulates just fine. If you're using that water to irrigate landscape material, obviously that the plant material can hold up pretty well to that. Plants are fairly resistant to pollutant loads.
And this might be a subtlety, but between the rain gardens versus the stormwater planter, is it just a size difference?
It really is just a size difference because the rain garden can be in the form of a planter. It could be completely contained vertically, or it can have what we call side slopes, where it's just kind of shallow transitions in grade as we're dropping the grade down. So the definition of a rain garden is just a larger landscape, and it can take on the form of a planter. It can take on the form of a swale that has side slope conditions. I didn't get into too much detail as the difference between planters and swales, just because it's a little bit more technical discussion. But basically, it's just a larger landscape space.
And my last question, maybe this is for Jim as well, but are pervious pavements allowed for fire access lanes on school projects?
Yes, they are, as long as they have the appropriate loading detailing associated with that, so that the fire truck can move through that pervious paving system without compromising the paving.
I was going to chime in back here regarding the first flush and the cisterns. I've seen existing designs where the disconnect has existing first flush bypass.
Yes, I've seen that.
So that first flush is designed to go into basically a separate little pipe, and then it trickles out from there, and so then you avoid some of those concerns, hopefully. Other than that, no new questions via email. Any other questions in the audience?
Okay. That's okay.
What do you see as the best, or some of the best projects you can do in a rural setting? So I think there's a lot of urban examples, but what about rural schools?
I think because there may not be a lot of impervious area associated with the school itself, looking at the building and looking at ways to take water into the landscape system. And it may not be utilizing swales or planters, but it might be just repurposing perimeter landscape along the building itself to allow for water to come off that rooftop. And then obviously looking at the parking lot, regardless if you're in a rural situation or an urban situation, most likely you're going to have a hard surface there to manage that water more effectively. And it may be more of a rather than using some of the planting systems that we've shown here, maybe it's more of a grass situation, and it's not containerized plants, but it's something that fits more contextually with the surrounding conditions. So I would look at focusing in on the building itself and the parking lot, and probably not adjacent streets, because they may not be as a robust system as other urban examples.
We have one more question that came in online.
Okay.
So this is someone who's wondering, they've seen like solar panels being installed on schools and they understand financially how that helps the school, you know, they have the solar energy. They were wondering if you had any ideas on financially how these projects might benefit a school.
Well, if you're looking at an overall operations and maintenance standpoint, if you're switching out, say, lawn areas to areas that over time will require less maintenance, you don't have to mow the landscape as much, there is some financial consideration, long-term financial benefits of switching out these areas to a less intense maintenance condition. And like I said before in the webinar, that it's going to take a little training to do that. And then the other piece in terms of financial incentives is that depending on the school district or the school, there may be, you know, stormwater fees that are associated with that particular area that the school is subject to pay. And by introducing these types of LID strategies, there is potentially incentive out there to address the stormwater fee component. I need to brush up a little bit more on that piece. I know that's common in a lot of different areas. I don't know if it's common specifically to school districts here, but that's something to look into.
No more questions from online.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. I think you did a great job of demonstrating some of the concepts we're really trying to target with this grant program. So I think we're doing pretty darn good on our agenda schedule so far. So with that, I was going to say that the State Water Board does not have a history of working with schools. So this has been quite a learning process for us. So one aspect of working with schools is trying to understand the role that the Division of State Architect plays in reviewing and approving projects at schools. So I believe that, you know, DSA has some review criteria that we aren't fully familiar with, and so wasn't quite sure how these types of projects would be, I guess, moved through their review and approval process. With that in mind, we've asked Jim to join us today from DSA, so he can share some information on the review process and share some thoughts on some of the LID concepts that we just saw. So, Jim Hackett.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for allowing me to. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate today. And you know, that reminds. I don't know if any of you saw the recent Jimmy Fallon episode where Jimmy Fallon was out there doing one of his lip syncing episodes, and it had he had who's the country star from The Voice? Yeah, Blake Shelton. So Blake Shelton kid's up there, and he's like 6'8", and then Jimmy Fallon comes up to get to the mic, and he's down here like this, trying to reach up. So I noticed that earlier today. I thought that was hysterical. But Kevin, that was awesome. As a structural engineer with the state of California, we deal in steel, concrete, masonry. We rarely get to deal with the green and the fun of making something really look good. And you humbled me tremendously, because I'm one of those guys at my own house where the rainwater comes down, and I didn't want it building up around my house, so I, ran it out to the street. So I'm inspired to make some changes. But no, it is true. As part of the state architect's office, there are certain things that we have to deal with, and we have to deal with them really more from a safety perspective than from an artistic landscape architectural perspective. And every single item that Kevin showed here is completely possible to build and to get approved through our office. many aspects of landscape architecture are not something that really creates a safety feature. So it doesn't go through our strict review. But there are some aspects that will have to. And I think, just generally speaking, our role is to oversee the structural safety of buildings, the fire and life safety of buildings, which gets into pathways, fire access lanes, where are the fire hydrants, how does the fire department get to that site, to accessibility and all of the walkways, ramps, how do people navigate through that site. And so any landscape feature that shows up on a set of plans, we don't go through the scrutiny relative to the plants and the types of things that you look at and you're seeing today, but we are looking for things such as drop-offs. Are you building large retaining walls? And anything over 4 foot, for example, as a retaining wall is something that we would have to look at and oversee and do a plan review on from a structural perspective. One thing that's been through the 80s, 90s, we see sort of a natural conflict, and that is that when we look at building plans and building designs, we look at the floors and the building pad preparations for structures, we have to really pay attention to the expansive nature of soil. And for years, I can recall looking at hundreds of soil reports where the recommendation in that soil report was to do exactly the opposite of what Kevin was describing. Take that rainwater, get it away from the building, because any water that piles up or collects next to the structure is going to tend to seep under the structure and cause expansive soils to heave. And one of the reasons why I did that at my own house was, as a structural engineer, as I saw that very phenomena happening. And I saw my own walls pushing up on my ceilings, and I saw a lot of cracking going on in there. So I didn't take a brain surgeon to realize I needed to get that water away. But so you're going to see a lot of buildings over the years and a lot of our schools that have that built in, because that was a criteria that the geotechnical engineers required as part of their design philosophies. Large planters can absolutely be done. Seating arrangements and architecturally designed landscape collection areas where people can assemble, that can all be done. They will have to come through our office if they start exceeding certain sizes. Like I said, 4 foot on retaining walls. Slopes. Slope is a big issue for accessibility and how do people in wheelchairs get across that site. So the landscape features have to pay attention to all those laws and all those rules as well. One of the things that is coming to light when we're talking about rainwater harvesting, and we're seeing more and more and more of this, and it may very well be as a function of this grant program that's happening right now, is the cisterns or the tanks themselves. The tank industries for large steel-plated, thick, heavy steel tanks that we might use for fighting fires, for providing water supply for entire school campuses. That's a very well-defined industry with a lot of standards that the design criteria are established. And given that, at the State Architect's Office, we created some rules that allow for the location of these larger tanks. If they're remote from a building, they're removed away from a building, we've been able to streamline that plan review process of those tanks. What happens is, in terms of cisterns or water collection for rain collection, is that these tend to be smaller. And as you saw on the picture that Kevin had on one of his slides, they're relatively tall compared to their diameter. That's a safety issue. And when you put that kind of a tank adjacent to an entryway or a walkway or a door, DSA is going to want to see that. We're going to need to look at that from a design perspective and do an evaluation of that design. So we run into that issue a lot. There's various different types of cisterns. The corrugated metal, you saw some, they were flat, but definitely thin gauge materials. Those are a little different. The standards are a little less defined, and so we're always running into discussions with the engineers as to the best way to evaluate that. But those kinds of tanks will definitely be looked at it dependent upon how far away from the buildings they are located, relative to walkways, relative to entrances, et cetera. Fencing's something that happens when it comes to elements that are, can be security related, that can be trying to protect you from large tanks or areas and keep people and students from being near those. So fencing becomes an issue that we would need to look at as well. So that's something that can fit right into different landscape designs. Kevin touched on utility and utility projects that involve the systems that service the structure and allow the structure to work. That's going to be your water, your sewer, your fire supply. It's going to be your electrical lines, transformers, underground vaults, things of that nature, which house those kinds of elements. We will look for those. And what do we look at? Well, we look for ensuring that those utility systems are properly embedded, that they're properly compacted. And when you come back in around the soil and you compact the soil, that can sometimes be in contradiction to what you want. You want nice, soft, loamy soil to get the water down into it. But if you're going to be putting utility lines, you're going to be compacting that soil. You might also, over electric lines, have to put in some kind of a impervious material just to protect those and keep people from actually hitting those. Anytime you get near a fire access road, or you put in an underground vault, for example, an underground cistern, or you've got utilities in that nature, fire access lanes have to be compacted to a certain percentage. And again, that can be contrary to water flow across the site. If you are going to be using pavers, if you're going to have other materials, they have to be capable of supporting a fire truck and the weight of the fire trucks. So we do look for those kinds of things in our plan reviews. One of the things that Kevin showed, and it was beautiful, were taking the spaces between classroom wings, that the old California classroom design where you had the main corridor with all the different wings coming off of that corridor. Landscaping is absolutely possible in there. One of the things, though, that you have to be careful of is, again, that can become very much a fire-related issue, and you have to have the appropriate separation between buildings or wings. You have to have the appropriate accessibility and there for the fire people to fight fires. So it may not be possible that every single one of those spaces between wings can be turned around and be used for the landscape purposes. There may have to be some discussion as to which can be used and what can't be used for that purpose because of the fire safety issues. Hydrant locations, for example, around the site, they have to be accessible from the fire, and they have to be able to get to those. So that's another piece to that consideration. Something that's new to all of us, and we're really getting more and more into it, is flood hazard design. School sites have to be, if you're in an area where you might have floodwaters that have been identified by your local jurisdictions, your local area plans, that are really driven from FEMA, the FEMA maps for their flood hazard areas. We have to be cognizant of that. We have to be able to ensure that structures or buildings are either raised or are protected from those floodwaters. And that can very much lead into landscape design. It's very much something that we're finding happening here locally in Sacramento. The Natomas area, the San Joaquin Delta areas have a significant concern for some of their sites and what they have to do with those. So that's another area that we're going to be involved in and look at relative to these kinds of landscape projects. Retention ponds, there's absolutely no reason why you could not have a retention pond on a site. The one thing that we have to caution school districts to look at is when you're starting to put in systems to redirect stormwater, you do have to work with your local area jurisdictions. You may have to be running a CEQA analysis on that site to make sure that you're not actually redirecting water into somebody's backyard. Those kinds of things have occurred in the past, and they somehow become litigious. So you do want to take that into account when you're doing that. That's not something DSA is going to look at per se, and we won't regulate that. But it is something that school districts should be aware of when you go down the line of redirecting major flows across the site, so that you're now heading towards the southwest corner instead of the northwest corner. Accessibility, path of travel must be maintained across the site, from the parking as you arrive on a campus, through your site, to your structures, to your playground areas. If you do a lot of, for example, if you're going to be doing some of these different planter areas, or the ponds and not ponds, but the retention areas, you have to be careful of drop-offs and the accessibility rules to make sure that somebody in a wheelchair or that they're blind and they're walking across, they have to be protected from being able to fall. They can't fall into those areas. So those kinds of things will be looked at from an accessible perspective. Most any landscape architect project, as a minimum, will be looked at from our accessibility unit. And that will just be something you would have to submit and have that reviewed by our access compliance group. Only the kinds of projects that have significant elements such as large planters, retaining walls, underground vaults, if you're affecting the project and the campus utilities, would need to come through and then join into our fire and our structural group. Those are the kinds of things that would affect and would require our review from a structural, fire, and access perspective. Again, access, curbs, ramps are a big one. That really affects the flow and the direction that the water needs to go. Play structures, for example, have to have the ability for people to get to them. So if you're trying to work landscape back, that has to be taken into account as that accessibility. So what we're really talking about is every site's a little bit unique, every site's a little different, and if you have questions on specific sites, it is always beneficial to come into our offices and make an appointment with a regional office and connect with the supervisors in the office to discuss these kinds of items. And that would be my greatest recommendation to you as you go through this. If there's any question at all, contact the regional office where your project is located and set up an appointment and come in and talk with them. So thank you very much. Question?
We have one online question when this one's over.
Current code requires, if we do projects, that we upgrade the entire site, I believe, to 2013 standards. That includes bathrooms, that includes sidewalks and cross slopes that may not be involved in the work of this project, but may be involved completely on another side of the campus. Is there going to be any relief from that kind of requirement if we're developing parking lot, and by all means we want to develop the project that we're building up to current ADA standards, but will there be a requirement, or will there be any relief from the requirement to improve things that are path of travel, perhaps, that are clear on the other side of the site?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's exactly the kind of question that I would suggest you have a preliminary meeting on as you're embarking on that project with that regional office. My understanding as and I'm a structural engineer, so please beg my pardon for if I don't have the exact answer for you, but my understanding is that the areas that are being worked on, the project and the scope of that project, you have to have an accessible path of travel to that project. That does not necessarily mean that every single aspect of the accessibility aspect of a campus has to be upgraded, but you have to provide a path of travel that is accessible to that work that is being worked on. So the parking lot may need to be upgraded. The restroom may need to be provided and upgraded. The drinking fountains may need to be provided and upgraded. Probably not every single one of them, but certainly the defined path of travel to that area. Please make sure you if you have that kind of a question, direct it to the supervisors for the accessibility within our group.
Okay, I think this is a somewhat similar question. Is there a list of project elements that trigger state architect review, such as installing structures over a certain height, that should be considered in planning?
I'm sorry, can you please say that one more time?
Yes. Is there a list of project elements that trigger state architect review, such as installing structures over a certain height, that should be considered in planning?
Okay, I assume you all could hear the question. Any structure that houses the instructional purpose of a campus, whether it's a classroom, gymnasium, multi-purpose building, library, you name it, any structure that features and includes that instructional purpose will require the review by DSA. Small storage facilities and small athletic facilities that are less than 250 square feet. There are some exemptions for those kinds of structures. There is a series of exemptions that are identified within our administrative regulations under the definition of a school building. Those types of elements can be exempt from our review. We also have an interpretation of regulations. It's our interpretation IRA 22, which provides some guidance relative to some of those specifics as well, and provides greater definition of what can be exempted. But to answer the question, it's not a height issue, it's a function issue as to whether or not a building requires our review. And again, that if you have specific questions, please contact that regional office. They can tell you exactly.
That's it from online.
Okay. One more question.
In the review process between the Drops technical review team and DSA, is there any collaboration, meaning does DSA need to approve it for Drops to be awarded and vice versa?
Well, that's a good question for the people running the
Okay.
Drops program. From our perspective, before construction can begin and a contract can be let, the plans have to be approved for that work. Where that fits in the grant timeline, I'm not exactly sure. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. That was very enlightening, but that was a good reality check on our objectives. All very important concerns. I guess going back to that last question, I'm glad you asked that. I was going to say that I think through this process that the Water Board and DSA will have to build some kind of a repertoire together. And I look forward to it being a two-way street. I think there's probably opportunity for us to evolve the way the types of BMPs we're proposing can be evolved to respond to some of those concerns. And I'm also hoping that some of the staff at DSA can become familiar with these concepts and hopefully recognize them and see the opportunities. And so when they come down, when they're presented, that they understand what's trying to be accomplished. So thank you, appreciate it. Now I'd like to introduce our new branch chief, Leslie Loudon. Leslie is the brainchild behind the Drops program, seeing it from its infancy to where it is now. I'd like to let her give a chance to say a few words before we start our presentation on the application assistance. So Leslie.
All right, well, thank you. I just want to thank everybody for coming, especially Jim and Kevin. It was really exciting to see, like Jeff said, from our concept that we came up with this Drops idea back in the spring, I think in March, when the governor issued his drought proclamation, and seeing it having evolved so quickly, and seeing the types of projects that can be done, and the collaboration that'll happen, it's really rewarding. So I'm really excited about this program. So I just wanted to thank all of you and for your enthusiasm too. We've gotten a lot of response to the program. So I'm not going to say much because we have a really jam-packed agenda. The staff have put together a really thorough presentation, so we're going to go through that and talk about all the requirements now for the grant program, and then walk through the application process. So I think that a lot of you will probably have questions, but I'm hoping that we'll answer all those as we go through the application process. And then we're going to have a quick little demo on our application submittal tool that some of you might already be familiar with. You can either stay for that or leave at that time. And then we'll be available, the staff, here to talk with you. I'm not sure if Jim's going to be able to stay the whole time, but if he can, that'd be a great opportunity for you to bounce some ideas off him. I did want to briefly address the question that came up as far as the DSA approval in the application process. And it's not going to be required as part of the award. What we realize is you will have to get your reviews and approvals before you go into construction, as we say, but we're not anticipating that all of these projects will be completely at the 100% design, and things will have to be modified as we go through the process of developing these projects. I think it'd be a great benefit for any applicant to be talking with DSA as they are developing their applications, so that you have some sort of feel for the scope of the projects that you're going to be developing and how much review and approval process that you would need. So that certainly would benefit you in the process and the application process if you've already consulted with DSA, but we're not going to expect you to have the approval at the award point in the process. So anyhow, with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Jeff take it back over and walk you through, and hopefully we'll answer all your questions. Thank you.
Okay. We have a fair amount of slides here to go through. Like Leslie said, hopefully we can answer all of your questions. Before we begin, I'll just point out that we have posted this presentation I'm about to go through on our website if you wanted to go ahead and open it up and download it for easy viewing or note-taking, etc. And again, we are going to be taking questions via our email, the dfa_grants@waterboards.ca.gov. I'm happy to take questions along the way. If you all wanted to raise your hand and ask a question at midpoint, please do. I'm happy to make this a conversation as we go through this. Also, Sarah may interrupt me as part of this if you all email in a question. She may interrupt me to ask me a timely question. Moving on then. So I'm going to be going through the DROPS guidelines portion, just kind of reiterate some of the points there, and then Brandon's going to be going through some of the specifics on the application part. So the eligible applicants. So hopefully most of you are familiar with the guidelines by now. You've had a chance to go through them. I'm going to be kind of covering some of the basic requirements again, but I'm going to be highlighting some of the issues we've been getting questions on and trying to address those questions and concerns. So to qualify, you need to be a local educational agency, LEA, with a K-12 as a K-12 school district or a county office of education or a federally recognized tribe or a K-12 charter school. We're only going to be awarding one grant to an LEA, and we do have a process to get pre-approved as a public agency to represent or to apply on behalf of one of those eligible applicants or to be an eligible tribal designee. So of course the question we've been getting is, how do I get pre-approved? The first thing you'll want to do is take note of Brandon Davison's name and contact information. Brandon's going to be receiving these requests and going through the process of doing that pre-approval. Now we do have a deadline of December 15th, 2014 to get that pre-approval request in. I recommend you do it as soon as possible and not wait till December 15th. We'd like to get those requests in sooner than later, so I encourage you to start that now. So when you contact Brandon, what's he going to be asking you? He's going to want to verify that you are meeting the criteria of a public agency, you are a city or a county or a district, that you'll recognize that as the grant holder, you will be responsible for maintaining these records for 35 years in accordance with the grant requirements. In addition, you will be inheriting the responsibility of the operation and maintenance requirements, which were required for a minimum of 20 years for all installations. The way that we're looking to, I guess, formalize the process with the school district is to have a letter that would be addressed to the State Water Board be submitted that will explain why the LEA is unable to apply. Also explaining what those specific roles and responsibilities of both parties will be. That will be defined also. How are you going to form a legal relationship? Is that going to be through an MOU or some kind of contract, et cetera? Also, we want that school to assert their commitment to the project and also the implementation of the education aspect. Going to reiterate the funding allocation sources and the split, as you'll see there too. This DROPS program is being funded through unallocated Prop 13 and 40 funds. The Prop 13 funds require that we have a split that we have labeled as the north-south split. And when we say south, we only mean 6 counties. Those would be Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, San Diego, and Ventura. So if you're in Santa Barbara, welcome to Northern California. You are no longer part of the Southern California as far as this grant's concerned. In Imperial County along the Mexico border, you're an honorary member of the North. So recognize that to qualify for the South funding, you will have to be part of those 6 counties. Now, if you saw in our guidelines, we have some set-asides defined in there. The first one being a disadvantaged school set-aside of about $6.4 million. First, in order to qualify for that set-aside, your project must be 100% benefiting that eligible DAS to qualify. The thing I was going to say about that is that those funds, those $6.4 million, are going to be coming out of the funds that are defined in that previous table. So, in addition, there's also a set-aside for the Los Angeles Unified School District for $5 million. Those funds will be coming out of the South funding. The bottom line of this is that there is not a lot of funding. So the result is going to be this should be a very competitive grant program. So keep that in mind. Based on the fact that this will be a very competitive grant program, I wanted to go ahead and make sure everyone understood clearly that what our priority projects should be. Make sure that the type of project that you're proposing is going to be meeting our objectives. So the applicant should have projects that are effectively addressing the primary objective of stormwater capture, reducing runoff, and increasing infiltration. With these types of projects, the bioretention basins, the rain gardens, the dry wells, rain barrels, permeable pavers. This should be the first thing you notice about what type of project you're looking to do. Then I've called what we would have as a secondary type of project where you're not doing a true stormwater capture project, but you are going to have some elements that are going to be supporting that objective. Maybe you're going to be proposing to remove some asphalt to increase perviousness, but you won't have a true stormwater capture element to it. Or you're going to be removing that ornamental turf and installing some drought-tolerant plants. You're going to complete that water audit, or you're going to be getting some education for your landscape maintenance staff to support some of these new installations. Finally, the last component that could be riding the coattails of your primary project would be the water conservation. Many schools have expressed a desire to reduce their water use indoors. So we've allowed that up to 10% of the total project cost may be used to target those type types of installations for low flow toilets or shower heads, or a leak detection and repair. In addition, we've received a lot of inquiries about field conversions to artificial turf for the obvious water savings. But unless that field conversion can be coupled with some kind of true stormwater capture element, it's not going to be a good fit for this program. Okay, one more reiteration that all grant-funded projects must be maintained and operational for a minimum of 20 years. And just a reminder that only one application per school district will be accepted. If you are a county office of education looking to apply, please make sure you are coordinating with your school district to verify that they are not pursuing their own application. We want to avoid overlap or conflicting proposals. This table is what you will see in our guidelines. It's our grant and match sliding scale. What I wanted to make clear in this table is how you need to interpret this. On the first column, we have our school district or county office of education size. What that is supposed to represent is applicants' capacity to take on different size grants. So the way you need to read that is if you're a school district and you have 10 schools and you represent, that includes 15,000 students, then you would be eligible for the maximum grant amount of $2 million based on that $10,000 to $50,000 student range. If that applicant were to come in and of their 10 schools are only proposing projects at 2 schools, and those 2 schools only have 2,000 students, you are still eligible for the full maximum grant amount of $2 million. Again, this is supposed to be indicative of your ability to take on a larger scale project. Really, we designed this sliding scale to capture the smaller schools. So that's why we have this fewer than 2,000 category, which allows for the minimum grant amount to go down to $50,000. So a smaller scale project could be proposed. The next thing I'll note is that the minimum match requirements, those are from Proposition 13, and those are required. Those are not negotiable. But Brandon will be talking about some of the match issues as part of the application process too. For the match, we do have an eligible start date of August 19th, 2014. That is the date we adopted our guidelines. You may use federal or state funds, local or private funding, or the in-kind services as eligible grant. As eligible match. We do expect applicants to apply in-kind services as part of this. We envision that there would be some student and teacher planning participation along with the educational activities. Again, Brandon will be revisiting this topic in greater detail as part of the application presentation. And finally, there is no match reduction for disadvantaged schools, so you will need to comply with the match that was defined in that previous table. The schedule. All proposals will be due January 15th, 2015. We envision awarding grants in the spring of 2015. We will likely be able to get some projects into a grant agreement that summer. We expect to have all work completed by the winter of 2015.